I'm Bouris and this is Straight Talk.
A leading PR person was bragging to me about how it's never been easier to hide stories than it is today. You only need to knock on 2 doors to make sure that people are looking somewhere else. I think it's reflective of the concentration in Australian media. It's News Corp and it's Nine Entertainment, and that's it. And I think that's why it's important there are more voices in town.
You've seen the evolution of the whole move to digital for one of the biggest mastheads through its whole evolution to today. What made you then decide to do what you've done?
The more that you understand about how the world actually works, it's not necessarily being reflected in our media.
You want this to be the masthead of the future.
There's a business to be had there and a business to be disrupted.
Chris Janz, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, quickly tell me what you've just launched, mate.
We've launched a new business publication, really there to reflect modern Australian business. It's called Capital Brief. If you look at Australian business media, there's an incumbent that's a self-declared monopoly. It's been around for about 7 years.
Name and shame, or don't shame, but name them.
No, it's the Financial Review, which I used to run.
Yep.
And love the Fin as a product. Does a great job, I think, of reflecting the top end of town, the odd corporate scandal, but Australian business has changed. There's been the rise of entrepreneurialism. We have global success stories that are worth billions of dollars and you can list them off. Canva, Afterpay, all of these great modern success stories. And also millennials have invaded the C-suite. It's not just the grey, and I can't speak myself, there's a few greys there, but
now be careful.
Just a few.
I'm looking at the camera.
But the rise of millennials in the C-suite, they're now running the country. It's not just people that have been doing it for the last 5 decades. So it's a publication really to reflect that modern Australian business. Really, it's there to reflect that we're targeting investors that allocate capital, those who help businesses achieve capital, business leaders who need capital to grow their businesses, and the decision makers in the federal capital, Canberra.
I want to flip it over a little bit and go back to Chris Janz. Wind it right back. Sydney boy, Melbourne boy, where are you from?
No, Queenslander.
Whoa.
I've lived in Sydney more than half my life now, but still very much a Queenslander.
So born in Queensland, whereabouts in Queensland?
In Monto, a small country town.
Where's that?
Middle of nowhere. Dad was a school principal, so we moved every 12 to 18 months and got to know the place. Middle of the state, up north, out west.
Where do you rank in the kids?
Oh, eldest. Number one, clearly.
Number one. Oh, is mum and dad still alive?
Yeah, they are.
I'd love to hear their view on that. Number one, maybe in chronological order. And I'd love to hear what your brothers and sisters got to say. So really very, very normal Aussie environment, okay? Very, very normal. At what stage did Chris Janz decide that he wanted to be a journalist or involved in media?
I always wanted to be a journalist when I grew up. Absolutely. And I have vivid memories in primary school of presenting the news bulletin for the class and creating a mock paper. Yeah, absolutely.
In primary, like under 12. It's 12 and under.
Yeah, absolutely. Always wanted to do it. And everyone was trying to convince me not to do it. That's not a smart path.
Everyone in your family?
Yeah, not my parents, but people in my extended family.
Yeah,
absolutely. Media is not where you want to be. You want to go off and do a proper job.
What the fuck excited you about media back then? Like, and why would you be thinking about that stuff?
I just wanted to tell stories.
So, okay, that's the point. You wanted to tell stories about what's going on, or you wanted to tell stories about fictional stuff? Because you might end up become a writer if that was the case.
Oh, I'm incredibly boring. I hate fictional movies. It's like take me to a world that's real. So it was always about telling real stories and then tapping away at, all of the high and mighty stuff. Let's solve all the injustices in the world through words. That was absolutely what got me into it. But I didn't start, I ended up with a journalism degree. I started actually doing computer science and business management because there was that constant refrain in the back of your head that journalism's the wrong path.
What excites you about what's really going on? For example, war in Ukraine or the Trump drama, and the storming the Capitol, etc. That's real stuff. What excites you about that? I mean, what's important to you about that?
I'm not so sure I'm excited about war in Ukraine or storming the Capitol, but I think it's reflecting what's actually going on. And I think
in a truthful sense?
In a truthful sense. And you'd know that the more that you understand about how the world actually works, it's not necessarily being reflected in our media.
Yeah.
And that's why media has a massive trust problem, which is one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. But you look at the opportunity to tell stories and reflect what's really happening in Australia. I think it's both important, but it's also a really interesting business.
Yeah, but so like, I don't want to pick on any one particular aspect, but like Qantas has been a big issue, and your old paper has been writing a lot about that, in particular Joe, and that's sort of take the social justice out of it. In other words, that we're all paying too much for airfares, and we should be letting other airlines in, all that sort of stuff. Take the economics out of it, and the unfairness of it. But in terms of the reality of what's actually going on, in other words, digging below the surface and finding what's really going on, which is what Joe's been doing. Joe Aston, I'm talking about now, of course. What is it about that, the truth of the reality, the truth of the reality that makes you excited? Where's that come from?
Qantas is a prime example, though, where out of nowhere, suddenly there was a media storm. And I think Joe's done an amazing job of prosecuting Qantas and where Qantas is at. But if you were at a Sunday barbecue, any Sunday barbecue with someone who has needed to get on a plane in the last few years, the conversation's actually been happening for a really long time in the real community.
But no one's talked about it.
It hasn't been elevated. It hasn't been elevated to a business issue and an issue that really needs to be addressed. And I think that's reflective across all sectors of the economy and across a lot of society. The conversations that you're having in the boardroom of your business, when you compare that to what's being discussed in the financial press or the press as a whole, often the two do not align. And there is a lot of yarns just to be dragged out and brought to the forefront.
Well, then why then, and I'm not being critical of the Fin Review, but why then do we have to rely on Joe, who's writing an opinion piece? Why is it that that's really the only column or the only part of the AFR, for example, and you were the boss of the joint, sort of digs in deep and the rest of it's sort of pretty transactional?
I think it's reflective of the concentration in Australian media. Media effectively, in the printed news media sense, it's a two-horse race now. It's News Corp and it's Nine Entertainment, and that's it. And if you look at the financial press, the Nine sales folks get up on stage and crow about the fact that the Financial Review is a monopoly. So when you've got a monopoly crowing about the fact they're a monopoly, you can miss things. Do
you think they miss things, or they've got control of it and they don't need to do anything else other than what Joe does? I mean, Joe's most read, by the way.
He's incredibly read. There are brilliant journalists at the Financial Review, and I'm not doing what I'm doing as an antidote to the Fin.
I get that.
I think that there are room for so many more voices in this country, and when you have one shop being the only shop in town, a lot of stories don't get told. Actually, a spinner was almost bragging to me the other day that it's never been easier to hide. A spin doctor, a PR, a leading PR person was bragging to me about how it's never been easier to hide stories than it is today. And I think that's reflective.
What do you mean? What's that mean?
So there's things going on in the broader business community. You only need to knock on two doors to make sure that people are looking somewhere else.
Right.
And I think that's why it's important there are more voices in town, and why it's important that there are more opportunities for stories to rise.
If I go back to the days when I first kicked Wizard off, I don't think the quality of the individuals was any better, but I think that the quality of what I got out of reading the Fin Review was better than compared to today. Are you responding to what your readers are looking for? And how do you work that out?
Oh, there are so many threads there.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm hoping with Capital Brief we create competition and all boats lift and everyone becomes better. Because I think the reality when you don't have that head-to-head competition every day, you can lean back and take it a bit easier.
Did you ever feel that when you were there?
Oh, my list of things to do was not done at the point that I left the joint. And part of that's the reality of an incumbent that's built an amazing business over 70 years, where you are building and building and building. To pivot and to change tact is actually both hard and risky. And that's a different situation to the one I'm in today, where you can genuinely get out the blank sheet of paper, talk to people in Australian business about what's important to them, talk to them about what they want to know, what they want to learn, what's of value to them, and build it accordingly. And it's that job of renovating something that already exists is always, I think, harder than starting with the blank sheet and starting again.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to get you to push it on the AFR or anything like that, but these are consequences of being in control of a marketplace. The consequences of being in control of a marketplace, if it's a monopoly or a duopoly or an oligopoly, and I mean, I experienced exactly the same thing with the banks, is that you don't want to shake the tree too hard. You're happy with your market share. You've got a certain market share, might be 50-50 if there's two of you. The extra 1% is not that you might be chasing is not worth the risk of losing 5%. So
100%.
you stay at 50 and you just say, let's make this 50% work. And by the way, your counterpart, the other side of the duopoly, says exactly the same. You don't even have to have the conversation. No one's having a meeting and talking about it. There's no acting in concert, but your minds are alike because, that's pretty logical stuff. And as a result of that, you just continually do the same thing. And until someone like you comes along, and shakes the tree a little bit. Like in the case of me, me Aussie. I was actually just outside before I came in here today. I was actually talking to James Simon, John's nephew, who ran Aussie, and we were talking about the old days, how easy it was just to shake the tree because the banks control the marketplace. They didn't want to make a move. They just took the view, let's just watch these upstarts kick the grass a little bit and see what comes out of it. If they make lots of money or take market share from us, we'll buy them. If they fail, so what? We've lost nothing. We'll let them fail. And that's what the incumbents do. You use the word incumbents. You were running the incumbent. I'm just trying to get around because I've never been an incumbent. So I'm just trying to get around your head and get into your head a little bit. The nature of the incumbent's thinking or the people at the top of the incumbent, is it correct what I just said? You're saying, let's not take risks. We've got 50%. Let's leave it where it is. Without being critical. I'm not.
No. I don't think I can speak for them.
Yeah.
But I can speak to.
What about for you though?
Oh, for me, disruption's my happy place. And if you look at each part of my career, each act, it's all been about disrupting the status quo. So when I joined what was then Fairfax in 2016, my brief was very clear. We're going to stop printing the daily newspaper and shift to a digital-only business.
It's pre-9.
This is pre-9. It's 2016. So 9 happened back of 2018.
It was a monstrous organisation back those days.
Oh, the building was on fire though. And
how do you mean?
It was very, very clear that if they continued down the path that they were heading on, revenues would cross the line with costs.
Yep.
And there was nothing left to cut.
Right.
So you had a very clear decision needed to be made to change strategy, change operating model, and determine whether or not there was a future for the business or not. It was an existential crisis.
How does the decision or the process start?
I think it was a fantastic board for that time and great chief executive in Greg Highwood for that time too, in that they could see what was going to happen if they did nothing and really believed that those mastheads, being the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age and the Financial Review, were so important to the fabric of Australian society that if you allowed them to disappear off the face of the earth, things wouldn't be good. So they were driven by the fact that the purpose of the company was important and that if they didn't switch things up, there wouldn't be that business anymore. There'd be the shareholding in Stan and the shareholding in Domain, which also were under the Fairfax umbrella.
Yeah, because Stan was a joint venture between Channel 9 and Fairfax.
That's right.
It was Gingell and Highwood put that deal together, which is a pretty smart deal, particularly at the time. It's probably now worth more than Fairfax is, probably in terms of value. Stan probably is, I'm not sure, but it'd be getting close. Great initiative. And I remember talking to Gingell at the time. He was telling me exactly what you just said. Fairfax has to do something. So, and David, I think, was a CEO of Channel 9 at the time, or the 9 Group. So Fairfax, pre-9 buying Fairfax, Greg Highwood or someone has come to you and said, we want you to take us digital.
Yeah, Greg came to me and said, if we gave you time to map out a plan.
Yep. What would it look like?
What would it look like?
And so, did you say you got 3 months to come up with an idea, or what's the deal?
We had 12 months.
12 months.
12 months became 6.
Yeah.
Because
So hurry up.
The platform burnt a little more. And there was a concern that if we waited any longer, there wouldn't be anything left to save.
Because I remember the time too, by the way, and sorry to interrupt them, but I remember the time too, because one of my mates is working there was a big push on redundancies. Offer redundancies to people, get rid of the staff, like cut the numbers. And it was Sean doing it. Sean was working for Greg, and Sean's had that shitty job of having to
not a lot of fun.
Cull. Not his territory, by the way.
No.
And so not only were they, so this is smart because business owners don't do this. We've got to cut costs because the margin's shrinking to nothing, but we also got to pivot. We've got to go another direction. You're running the pivot piece. So you're gone from 12 months to 6 months, come up with a strategy.
Yeah, so the way it worked is the existing business was called the white business. And then I was running the blue business, which was building the foundations for the future. The white business continued on their merry way in the headquarters in Pyrmont, continued making decisions as if it was business as usual. The blue business was in Surrey Hills, just down the road from where we are now. A group of people who were either new to the business or had been brought in for this particular project with a very, very clear brief. You have a blank sheet of paper, but access to these amazing brands, these at-scale revenues, this resource, the journalism that we produce. What would things look like if you were designing that in 2016 instead of inheriting what had developed over the last 180 plus years? And that's what we went about designing. And it was a team working, for some really uncomfortably. Their partners would be in the existing business and they wouldn't be able to talk about what they were doing in the new company.
So black ops.
Overstating it to a degree, but we were just down the road from News Corp and no one really knew what we were doing. No one in the mothership, so to speak, in Pyrmont, and no one at any of our competitors. And that was really important because you needed to be able to not be encumbered by how things work at the moment, or you couldn't restrain your thinking. You had to be able to lay it all out on a page. In an ideal world, how would you do things? And then the next phase from there was, okay, we're not in an ideal world. How do we practically do things?
How about the advertising side of it? Because one of the big issues was revenue, because the Seeks of the world and all those other organisations are stealing your lunch, because that was a big deal. I mean,
100%.
The money you guys made out of Sydney Morning Herald
They were the rivers of gold.
Gone, which is what Kerry was always after, in the early days. But he didn't realise it was going to disappear very quickly with the likes of Seek, etc. Were you briefed, or did your brief include how do we make more money out of the digital side of it too, like in terms of revenue? How did we turn that on?
It was top to bottom. So it was, what's our strategy?
Yep.
Because a strategy of cutting costs faster than revenue declines is not a strategy. And then flowing from that strategy, what's the operating model? So we looked at every part of the business, the newsroom, how we sold advertising, how we approached subscriptions and who our customers actually were, how we print and distribute newspapers, every element of the business, and how we communicate with our own people, and the authenticity and actually taking people along the journey with you. Every single aspect we worked through. And then on Valentine's Day of 2017, things switched and the business that was the white business no longer existed, and the crew that had been coming up with the new plan were in charge.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that.
So it was sort of free in the beginning, and it was a bit confusing.
It's the tension that exists in a lot of big media companies, in that you need the scale for advertising, but also you can see the future of advertising is being disrupted by Google and Facebook, who have such enormous supply and can set the price. So you want to focus on subscriptions and getting people to pay for your journalism, but you can't lock it down too much because then you threaten your scale. So you're in this constant balancing act that I think is really quite challenging. And it's challenging on a couple of levels. It's challenging because you're not sure who you want to be, but also it means that you're producing journalism to suit both purposes. And sometimes
it
they
doesn't
can
work
conflict
either
with
way.
each other.
Yep.
Yeah, one prefers clickbait, the other prefers quality and depth. And the two generally don't really come together perfectly. So you need to have trade-offs and make decisions. Whereas when you're doing what we're doing at Capital Brief, you can just focus on the subscriber. We want to produce great journalism that people are willing to pay for. It provides clarity that you don't otherwise have.
Yeah, so that's very interesting because, because obviously we've evolved digital has evolved a long way from 2017 to today, and you're able to pick the good side of digital out and do what you want to do at Capital Brief effectively, what works best for you. But back in that period, it was for me, it was extraordinarily challenging just watching you guys. I mean, I'm not in the media, but I was watching the media guys and determining this balance between, as you said, deep, meaningful AFR newspaper articles and clickbait, sort of where it went. That's where it ended up, clickbait. And I sort of sat there for a long time. So in other words, what got the most impressions?
You've nailed their challenge with journalism today, which is it was all about chasing scale.
Yep.
And then Google and Facebook came along and had scale themselves, but scale where no one was valuing context. So the price of an eyeball was
context being quality.
Quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the price of an eyeball is the price of an eyeball.
Yep.
So you don't care whether or not you're watching cat videos on YouTube as an advertiser.
Yep.
or whether it's against an investigative piece that brings down a government, it's an eyeball.
Yep.
And the intellectual curiosity of the person reading it at the time doesn't matter. The context doesn't matter. The fact that it might be followed by an ISIS beheading on London Bridge doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a bit of a reversion to form over the last few years where people have started to question, hey, context really does matter. I've spent decades building trust in my brand and trust in my business. Why would I allow that to potentially be eroded for saving a few cents by doing business over here? Maybe context really does matter.
From an advertising point of view, you're talking about, or from the point of view of the organisation producing the content?
Both. Because if your business model is driven by advertising, obviously when you're competing against someone who doesn't pay for much of their content, you're going to have to produce as much as you can at as low a cost as possible to even catch up. But when advertisers start demanding, hey, context really matters. It matters that I'm surrounded by quality. It matters that I'm in an environment where people trust what they're reading and I'm willing to pay for it, then it changes that behaviour.
How long did it take for media buyers / advertisers to start to work out or conclude that they want a different style? They wanted something a bit more contextual and maybe something with a bit more depth.
I don't think the job there is done, to be honest.
Right.
But what we set about doing, and the Sydney Morning Herald in particular, had a different personality in print than it did digitally.
Right, is that right?
Oh, absolutely. smh.com.au in the early teens was a different team altogether. So the same DNA was not transplanted across both products,
right.
Even though
I didn't realise
they shared
that.
a brand. And it's because the digital model was about scale.
Yep.
Whereas the print model was about serving a paying audience.
Yes.
And the two different models. So part of what we did was bring those together and really say, hey, if you're not proud to have this on page 3 of a newspaper, it shouldn't be leading a website with the same brand. And our end goal here is to have people paying for our journalism. If they don't trust us and believe that what they're getting every time they come to us is quality, then they're going to feel gypped. So you need to shift things over. And then it was about having the same conversation with advertisers and saying, hey, you need to value this trust. You need to value the connection people have with this brand. And that worked. In 2017, 2018, for the first time in a long time, all the revenue lines were lifting, whether it was print advertising, print retail circulation, print subscriptions, or digital advertising. Every single one was growing for the first time in a long time within that business. Readership for a long time has been at record levels because the internet, the internet's a great vehicle for lots of eyeballs on the page. So lots of people reading, that wasn't necessarily translating into a business result.
But are you saying to me that management or somebody started to talk to the media buyers and the advertisers?
One chat at a time.
Really?
There was a lot of...
So you educate the market?
Yeah, a lot of boot leather, going out to your customers and reminding them why they valued you.
Yeah.
Rather than putting yourself in the commoditized frame where you're just competing on price.
Yeah.
And you will never win on price against someone like Google that has enormous global scale. And can tip the market overnight if they so choose.
And it doesn't matter if they lose for a while. They can run at a loss for a while.
And Australia's a rounding error. So
totally.
Compared to our local media where it is their business.
You've seen the evolution of the whole move to digital for one of the biggest mastheads, the Fairfax Group, through its whole evolution to today. What made you then decide to do what you've done?
Well, I decided to leave Nine as it is now. And
because Nine took over Fairfax.
Nine took over Fairfax. Yep. Bought the company, and I was the one member of the management team from the Fairfax side that was part of the Absorbs group.
Yep.
And did that for a couple of years, decided it was time for something new. And spent a bit of time reflecting, to be honest, about what was important to me. I had a bunch of conversations with a stack of people who all had their 2 cents to add on what I should be doing next. And I realised, not entirely quickly, but over time, that there are 2 things that I love. One is media's in my blood, as irrational as it is.
Media being telling stories about real things.
Yeah. And the business of media too excites me. I actually think it's an incredibly fascinating business, and maybe one of the reasons why running your own show and having that entrepreneurial play is a lot more fun to me than the day-to-day of corporate life.
Tell me about the challenges of being the entrepreneur, though. How nervous were you feeling?
Not, to be honest.
No?
No, because it's a well-thought-through plan. We know where we need to be at certain
milestones.
Milestones.
Yeah.
I've got an amazing team. I've got people around me that really believe in what we're doing and I know can execute upon it. We've got great partners and backers. So you kind of, all of the key things, the boxes are ticked. And over time, I've come to believe that the benefits of incumbency are less than the fun that you can have disrupting the ship and the benefits of the blank sheet. So I'm pretty confident in what we're doing. I'm sure there'll be moments, and through my past roles, I've experienced plenty of curveballs and grenades. I actually enjoy responding to that, so it's not nervous.
Have you had any response from the incumbents? So, incumbents know exactly what you're up to. They know you. And this is a well-trodden path. Disruptors come in and try and take market share from incumbents, and incumbents do the usual thing. They just sit back and watch what happens, or sometimes they try to, play a few games and try and disrupt the disruptor. Have the incumbents at this stage responded, or do they say, "Well done, Chris. Good on you, mate. Wish you all the best"?
Oh, there've been some people that have been incredibly generous with their support, and can see, I think, that the more people in town that are producing great journalism, the better it is for everyone. And yeah, there's been some tricks too from some others, and some quarters where I expected it, some quarters where I didn't expect it. Just with the support, to be honest, though, there's some people that have been incredibly generous.
So you need content at the end of the day. Like you're a newspaper effectively, but using a.
So we don't have to fill 40 pages. So
not every day.
We'll just produce the quality that meets the bar.
Okay, so are you like the chief editor, so to speak? No,
I'm the CEO.
So
we've got an editor in chief, and that separation from the business to the journalism, I think, is important.
Right. So where do you recruit your people from?
We've from all over the place. So our editor-in-chief did come from what used to be Fairfax. He was the national business editor of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age.
What's his name?
John McDouling.
Okay.
And he's fantastic. He was part of that process that I was talking about earlier, where we set about rebuilding and re-engineering those mastheads. And that's where I saw him at his best, when he was really unencumbered by all of the legacy thinking and could just build it as it should be built. And so he's perfect for what we're doing. But we've discovered people along this journey too who put up their hand and said, "Hey, I want to be part of this. I think journalism.
Pick me.
I think journalism's important. And I believe in what you're doing." And some of the best talent that we've got on board, I didn't know 6 months ago. So we went into the process with a really open mind of, it's not just the crew that I've come to know over what is now, almost 3 decades in this game. It's also new people who had been tolling away at a small publication or slightly off-Broadway journalism, and bringing them to the fore. We want to break down stories. We don't want to beat them up.
What's that mean?
Well, a lot of what day-to-day reporting is about is going into that meeting and editors piling on and making the story more sensationalist to attract a bigger audience. We don't want to do that. We just want to say, this is how it is. This is why the story matters to you, not here's how we've hyped it to attract more clicks.
That's interesting because, from my point of view, I do want someone to curate why it matters to me.
Yeah.
I'm the sort of person who would like someone to tell me what it is you need to know, Mark, as a business person.
Yeah,
what's relevant.
And that providing that context and insight is really important. One of the products that we produce is a daily newsletter, The Edition. It's free, so you don't have to pay to access it. And it really is about, here's what's happened today and here's why it's important. It'll take you 2 minutes to read.
Right.
So
that's good.
It's not about making people click on as many things as they possibly can and sucking them in for half an hour. It's about providing our value in Capital Brief. What we're doing with Capital Brief is, here's what's happened, here's why it matters.
Will the model include perhaps some advertising at some stage?
Yes, but it'll be, again, a different model to
what I normally see.
What you normally see. Because what you do see, if you go on a standard news site, pick a news site, any news site.
I can't stand it.
There'll be maybe 12 messages on a page.
Yep.
It's incredibly cluttered.
Yeah, I can't stand it.
You skip over it. Or they'll be down the bottom of the story. They'll be selling you vitamins.
Yeah, I hate it. I just don't like it. Or in the middle of the story, I've got to sort of get past it. I don't like it.
Yeah, so our model's different. It's one commercial partner per page because it's not our core focus. Our core focus is not funding this business through advertising. It's funding through subscriptions. And if we're providing a really aggressive and, sometimes untruthful experience through advertising, you're not going to value what we're putting towards you every day. You probably won't trust us, and we'll be in the same category as a bunch of other publications.
How does a business like yours go about, or a concept like yours go about raising the capital? Was it bootstrapped by you and your mates, or was it, have you gone to the marketplace and sort of got people to back you?
No, we went to the market, and the honest truth is I've been working on this idea for a while and got offered a very big job and had this crossroads of, do I pursue the path of building this business from scratch, or do I, what was in my mind, take the easy path and
Take the wage.
Pocket a big wage and
wage, super, holidays, etc.
That's it. Holiday house.
Yeah.
Tick, 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 tick. And I then started having conversations with people who could provide capital, because I was like, oh, if I don't do this now, it's never. I've got to either try and build this business or accept that I'll be a wage slave for life and, probably retire pretty happy.
But unfulfilled.
Yeah, well, I think so. And you start having conversations with people about media, and the first assumption is that it's not a business. Media is not a business, not realising that the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age and the Financial Review operate on 30% margin. They're among the most profitable newspapers in the world. So there's a business to be had there and a business to be disrupted. The second is people will often say, yeah, I'm into it because people need to understand that insert bugbear here is real. So whether, they want to prove that fossil fuels are great for the world or climate change is real, like opposite ends of the spectrum. I'm not in this for an ideological bent. And I think if you accept capital through that lens, you're going to be having similar issues to people that are also led by proprietorial influence. So when you start to tease that away, you get to what's really important to you. And what was important to me was people that understood that, hey, I'm interested in this because it's a great business model. I'm interested in this because I back the team. I'm not interested in it because I'm fascinated by the power that media brings or could bring, or that I could use this megaphone to share whatever message I want to get out there. And finding those people was what was really important. And we've got that in the team at Shearwater Capital that's backing us. They're really...
They're your VC? Venture capitalists?
Yeah, they're a VC firm, but VC done pretty differently because it's effectively private wealth behind it rather than a bunch of other people tipping money in.
Yeah, okay. So you got your patient capital. They believe in your thesis. That's really important. They've got to believe in your thesis, because otherwise they're a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
You're effectively a slave to what they want to be their outcomes. So you don't mind being a slave to your own outcomes, but not to someone else's outcomes.
Well, I've had experience too with venture money in the past, and learnt that I was spending more time managing the investors.
Yeah, totally.
Managing the business. I want to run the business. I don't want to manage investors.
Have you already started to feel an evolution in any part of not so much the business model, but the plan? Are you starting to say, shit, hang on, that wasn't quite right, that bit there?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There have been some things that have surprised me.
Like revelations.
Yeah, but not and surprised me. Yeah, just in a really positive way.
Delightfully.
It's good. They're all good signals at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's, I expected probably a few more bumps quite early on than we've had. So that's a good thing, but it also makes me nervous.
Ultimately, Kerry always used to say this to me, like, son, you're going to start off something disruptive. That's great. He said, but you better have an exit plan. And, exit plans are about sort of attributing a valuation to yourself, to the business based on normal valuation processes, say 5 years' time, looking at who might buy me, can I list it in the public domain, or any combination of those things, or not, because it could be so bloody profitable, I just keep it as a shareholder. Do you and your founders have a plan around exit?
No.
Potential exits?
No. And I think that was important to me.
So you did it on purpose?
Intentionally.
Yep. Can you take me through that?
Intentionally coming into the business and building a business that has generational value. We're not coming into the business building a business to flip. And that, I think, changes some of the decisions that you'd make. It's, what is important in building this business is that we achieve the actual outcomes,
Yep.
not perceived outcomes. And I've seen it in the private world. I've seen it in the public company world, where you are performing activity for perception, or performing activity so people
Qantas.
think that you're on a certain path.
Qantas.
Yeah. Well,
Profit. Like they thought the perception was everybody wants a profit. Shareholders want a profit. But they didn't realize as customers couldn't give a shit about that.
Bone's connected to the.
I mean, it's a big drama. It's a massive drama. It's been a major lesson for me watching this program, this process. It's been like watching a Netflix series.
But did you think it was inevitable as a customer,
Yep,
someone who had experienced the airline?
Yep, I did. But I didn't. I didn't consciously think it was inevitable at the time. Someone who was experiencing Qantas, but now that I look back on it, it was inevitable.
Yeah.
As a history lesson to me, and it's a big lesson, and lots of other lessons around it as well, but that in particular. So you consciously just have made a decision not to put it into a position where you can create a liquidity event, say 5 years or 10 years, whatever the case may be, because you've got patient capital. That's very handy to have at the end of the day. So, and you said generational. So it sounds like you want this to be the masthead of the future.
If we do it right, we're building the business that I want to work in, and the business that I think anyone who has journalistic talent wants to work in. So why would you then pack up shop and go do something else? Like, if we do it right, it's where I want to be every day.
Yeah, but for your future, like you can see yourself, wandering around the halls of the office or the environment, wherever that is, physically as like a 70-year-old or a 75-year-old being proud of what you've created.
Oh, I'd hope so.
But obviously,
I'd hope I'd be proud of what, but at 70 and 75, I'm probably not planning on being in the office.
No, but wandering around, like in other words, you may still be a shareholder or you're somehow involved.
Yeah.
As opposed to this is just a in and out. I know I can make a good quick quid out of this because I'm going to disrupt the market. I'm actually going to take 10% share from the incumbents, and the incumbents are going to be effectively forced to buy me back.
Yeah. It's opportunistic. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But I think that there's an audience need and desire, and a really profitable incumbent that are ready to be disrupted. But the outcome that I'm seeking is absolutely not to build something and then flip it.
So what do you think is going to happen in 10 years' time? Do you think they're all those hard copy things are just going to disappear off the face of the earth? We're not going to be buying the Fin Review physical?
I think print will be gone in a decade, no doubt. Yeah. If you look across all aspects of traditional media, the model is on fire. Like, there are structural challenges that it doesn't matter how
on fire and burning down sense,
and absolutely
not on fire. Yeah, in a burning down.
Not good on fire.
Yeah, on a burning down
bad
sense.
on fire.
Yeah.
It's you have a situation where fewer and fewer people are watching TV delivered over an aerial.
Yep.
Fewer and fewer people are picking up a printed paper.
Yep.
And the costs of producing that paper, the cost of the physical paper, have gone up because lots of people that used to produce that paper now want to make Amazon boxes.
Yep.
The world has changed. So if you sit still and keep doing what you're doing, you will end up being in serious, serious trouble. And I think that's the reality across the whole media landscape. And I think the opportunity for us with what we're doing with Capital Brief is not being encumbered by that need to maintain your revenues while maybe you exit printed newspapers, or maintain your revenues while 25% fewer people are watching the 6 o'clock news this year than they did 2 years ago. That's a really challenging balancing act. We just need to build.
Sometimes if I get home in time, I might turn the news on. The 6 o'clock news.
How often are you home at 6 o'clock?
Rarely.
Yeah.
But say on a weekend, for example, on a Sunday after I watch the footy, and I think they're just telling me what I heard I've already read.
That's exactly why I needed to leave that kind of business and go and do something new, because the reality is media consumption has changed, and you either sit there and address it head on, or you keep doing things the way that you've been doing them for the last 60 years.
Gary Pack once told me that. He said, don't worry about which one people prefer. Just be in the swim, and you'll get your market share. You just got to be in the swim, and you're in the swim. Chris Janz, good to see you, mate.
Thanks so much, mate. Appreciate it.